I clutched the email printout, rereading the elegantly crafted words that hid a world of disdain. While we respect your humble beginnings, certain standards must be upheld. Vivian's thinly veiled insult stung, but I refused to let her prejudice rattle me. Not when I had fought tooth and nail to provide my daughter Ilara with every opportunity life hadn't afforded me. The bookstore's bell chimed, and Ilara bounded in, her infectious smile brightening the room. "Mom, you'll never guess what," she beamed, waving her left hand, which now bore a sparkling diamond ring. "Jonas proposed!" My breath caught in my throat as I studied the ring, undoubtedly an heirloom from Jonas's affluent family. Vivian's words echoed in my mind, a stark reminder of the divide between our worlds. But as I looked into Ilara's shining eyes, I couldn't bear to dampen her joy. "That's wonderful, sweetheart." I pulled her into a tight embrace, blinking back tears. "I'm so happy for you both." Over the next few days, Ilara was euphoric, gushing about wedding plans and her future with Jonas. I listened intently, committing every detail to memory to ensure her happiness lasted. The night I finally met Jonas, my misgivings amplified. While he treated Ilara with utmost tenderness, I detected a subtle shift in his demeanor when discussing his family's expectations. "Mother insists on a grand affair," he said, eyes flickering with unease. "She wants to uphold tradition, you see." I forced a smile, silently vowing to protect Ilara from the elitist world he hailed from, a world that viewed us as unworthy, despite my daughter's incredible spirit. In the following weeks, Vivian's thinly veiled jabs continued, each one chipping away at my resolve, until one fateful night when Ilara confided her fears after enduring snide remarks at a high society event. "They acted like I don't belong, Mom." Her eyes glistened with unshed tears, "like I'll never be good enough." White-hot anger surged through me, igniting a fierce determination. I would not stand idly by while my daughter's self-worth was decimated by those blinded by their own privilege. As I held Ilara close, offering reassurances, a plan began to take shape, a way to make Vivian face the consequences of her cruelty. It would require carefully cultivated sabotage, but I was prepared to go to any length to protect my family's dignity. With renewed purpose, I began laying the groundwork, anonymously planting seeds of doubt about Vivian's charitable endeavors. A whisper here, a strategically leaked document there, all designed to unravel the carefully curated facade she hid behind. My actions were driven not by malice, but by an unwavering love for my daughter and a refusal to let her light be dimmed by those who couldn't see her true worth. Come what may, I would ensure Ilara's happiness, even if it meant bringing Vivian's twisted kingdom crumbling down. A few days later, Ilara arrived at the bookstore, practically glowing with excitement. "Mom, I can't wait for you to meet Jonas." Right on cue, a tall, well-groomed young man entered, offering a polite smile. "Mrs. Ramirez, it's a pleasure to finally meet you." His voice carried a subtle air of confidence, no doubt instilled by a lifetime of privilege. I studied him intently, sizing up the man who had captured my daughter's heart. "Please, call me Maribel." As we settled at a corner table, Jonas launched into tales of his family's legacy, a long line of successful entrepreneurs and philanthropists. "Mother and father are quite involved in the city's social scene," he mentioned offhandedly. Ilara beamed with pride, clearly enamored. But I couldn't ignore the condescending undertone laced within Jonas's words, as if his pedigree automatically elevated him above us. "And what do your parents do for a living?" he asked, his gaze lingering on the modest bookstore. I bristled at the implied slight, but maintained my composure. "I'm the sole owner of this shop. It was my husband's dream before." My voice trailed off, the familiar pang of grief resurfacing. Jonas nodded, his expression unreadable. "I see. Well, I'm sure Mother and Father will be delighted to meet you both." As the evening progressed, it became increasingly clear that Jonas had been groomed from birth to uphold his family's elite standing. Every anecdote, every subtle mannerism reeked of entitlement and an ingrained belief in his own superiority. When Ilara excused herself, I seized the opportunity. "Jonas, I need to know, are you truly prepared to embrace a life outside the gilded world you're accustomed to?" He regarded me for a moment, his brow furrowing. "Mrs. Rami, Maribel, I assure you, my feelings for Ilara are genuine, but you must understand, my family has certain expectations." The implication hung heavy in the air. Expectations, that likely didn't include a modest bookshop owner as a mother-in-law. I see. I fought to keep my voice steady. And if Alara doesn't meet those expectations? Jonas's gaze dropped, his jaw tightening. I would never ask her to change who she is, but there are social obligations that come with my family's status. My heart sank as the truth became clear. No matter how deep Jonas's affection, he would always prioritize his family's antiquated notions of propriety over Alara's happiness. In that moment, I realized the true battle lay ahead. If I wanted to protect my daughter from inevitably being crushed beneath the weight of their entitled world, I would have to take a stand. As Alara returned, blissfully unaware of the storm brewing, I resolved to shield her from the harsh realities for as long as I could. But deep down, I knew a reckoning was coming. One that would force me to fight with every ounce of my being to ensure my daughter's light never dimmed. A few weeks later, Alara bounded into the bookstore, waving an embossed envelope. Mom, we've been invited to a charity gala hosted by Jonas's parents. My stomach twisted at the prospect of facing Vivian and her cohorts head-on, but I refused to let my apprehension show. That's wonderful, dear. We'll need to ensure you're properly prepared. Over the next few days, I coached Alara on etiquette and social graces, determined to equip her with the tools to navigate the shark-infested waters of high society. We pored over place settings, studied fashionable attire, and rehearsed polite small talk. The night of the gala arrived, and Alara looked every bit the poised young woman, clad in an elegant gown I'd meticulously altered from a thrift store find. As we approached the grand entrance, my heart pounded with a mixture of pride and trepidation. Vivian descended upon us like a hawk, her perfectly coiffed visage betraying no hint of warmth. Alara, darling, you look ravishing. Her gaze slid to me, lips curling into a tight smile. And you must be the mother. Maribel Ramirez, I replied, meeting her stare unflinchingly. A pleasure. As we mingled among the guests, I couldn't help but notice the thinly veiled disdain emanating from Vivian's circle of friends. Whispers and sidelong glances made it abundantly clear that my presence was seen as a blight upon their glamorous event. Alara, bless her heart, remained oblivious, until a portly woman with a penchant for garish jewelry sidled up to her. So, you're the little bargain Jonas plucked from the discount bin, she sneered, her words dripping with contempt. I watched in horror as Alara's face crumpled, her eyes welling with tears. Before I could intervene, Jonas swooped in, ushering his fiancée away from the sneering harpy. White-hot fury coursed through my veins as I sought out Vivian, who was holding court among her sycophantic entourage. A word, if you please, I bid out, struggling to maintain my composure. Vivian arched a perfectly groomed brow. Can't you see I'm occupied, dear? Run along now. The dismissive words struck a nerve, and I could no longer contain my outrage. How dare you allow your vapid cronies to belittle and humiliate my daughter? I hissed, uncaring of who overheard. She's 1,000 times the woman any of you could ever hope to be. Vivian's eyes widened, and for a fleeting moment, I glimpsed the mask slipping, the insecure, petty woman beneath the polished facade. But just as quickly her haughty demeanor resurfaced. Careful, Maribel, she purred, her voice laced with venom. Wouldn't want to cause a scene, now would we? As she sauntered away, I realized the gloves were finally off. Vivian had declared war on my family, and I would be damned if I didn't fight back with every weapon in my arsenal. The battle lines were drawn, and I would stop at nothing to protect Alara from the cruelties of Vivian's twisted world, even if it meant sacrificing my own dignity in the process. In the aftermath of the disastrous gala, Alara retreated into a shell of doubt and insecurity. The spark that once lit up her eyes had dimmed, replaced by a haunting uncertainty. Mom, what if they're right? She asked one evening, her voice barely above a whisper. What if I'll never truly belong in Jonas's world? My heart shattered at the dejection etched across her features. Pulling her into a fierce embrace, I vowed, You listen to me, Alara Ramirez. You are kind, intelligent, and strong. Qualities those shallow people could never comprehend. She managed a weak smile, but the seed of doubt had taken root. I knew then that drastic measures were necessary to protect her from the toxicity festering within Vivian's twisted realm. The next morning, I typed out an anonymous email detailing disturbing discrepancies in the financial records of Vivian's pet charity project. With a few keystrokes, I set the digital wildfire ablaze, ensuring the information found its way into the hands of the city's most formidable investigative reporters. Within days, the scandal exploded across every reputable news outlet. Vivian's immaculate reputation began to unravel as allegations of misappropriated funds and self-serving schemes poured forth. Her charitable endeavors, once the crown jewels of her public persona, now appeared to be little more than an elaborate facade to buy social status and clout. As I watched her desperately attempt to douse the flames consuming her carefully constructed image, a twisted sense of satisfaction washed over me. This was merely the first salvo in my campaign of retribution, a harsh lesson that one should never underestimate a mother's wrath. Yet, even as Vivian's world crumbled around her, Alara remained blissfully unaware of my role in igniting the inferno. She fretted over the potential fallout on Jonas's family, her pure heart aching for their turmoil. "What if this destroys everything?" she confided one night, her brow creased with worry. "Jonas is under so much pressure already." Gently, I cupped her face in my hands. "Sweetheart, any family that would crumble over mere allegations wasn't built on a strong foundation to begin with." Her lips curved into a small, grateful smile, and I marveled at her unwavering capacity for empathy, a trait that would forever set her apart from Vivian's ilk. In the following weeks, I continued my relentless assault, anonymously leaking snippets of damning information that further eroded Vivian's credibility. Former allies began to distance themselves. Once loyal socialites suddenly found excuses to exclude her from their inner circles. Yet, through it all, Alara remained steadfastly by Jonas's side, her love for him unwavering even as the foundations of his world shifted beneath their feet. As the onslaught against Vivian escalated, a part of me couldn't help but revel in her downfall. This was the price she paid for daring to diminish my daughter's worth. A harsh reminder that true strength stemmed not from wealth or status, but from the iron will to protect those we love, no matter the cost. In the days leading up to the pivotal family dinner, I could sense Alara's growing trepidation. Jonas had warned her that this event would likely determine whether she was accepted or rejected by his parents' sophisticated circle. "What if they decide I'm not good enough?" she fretted as we pored over etiquette books and practiced conversational niceties. "After everything that's happened with the scandal, then they'll be the ones missing out on knowing an extraordinary woman," I assured her, pushing down the simmering rage I felt towards Vivian and her cohorts. While Alara focused on preparing herself, I had my own plans in motion. Through discreet channels, I'd learned the guest list for the dinner, a veritable who's who of the city's elite. Bankers, philanthropists, even a local politician with aspirations for higher office. One by one, I reached out to those on the list, carefully planting seeds of doubt regarding Vivian's true nature. A whispered rumor here, a leaked document there, each meticulously crafted to cast her in an increasingly unsavory light. "I'm simply looking out for the community's best interests," I'd murmur with feigned concern whenever suspicions were raised about my motivations. As the dinner drew near, I could sense the ground shifting beneath Vivian's perfectly manicured feet. Hushed whispers and sidelong glances followed her wherever she went, as the once unquestioned doyenne of high society found herself increasingly ostracized. The night before the fateful dinner, Alara confided her fears once more. "Mom, what if I say the wrong thing? What if they decide I'm just not enough?" Gently, I brushed a stray hair from her face. "You are more than enough, my love. And if they can't see that, then they're the ones lacking in vision and grace." As I held her close, steadying her resolve, a sense of grim determination washed over me. Come what may, I would ensure Vivian and her ilk received their comeuppance for daring to belittle the most precious person in my world. The next evening, as Alara and I approached the opulent estate, I couldn't help but feel a sense of perverse satisfaction. Vivian's downfall was imminent. I could practically smell the desperation wafting from the meticulously manicured grounds. As the dinner unfolded and the guests arrived, one by one, I watched them exchange furtive glances and murmured asides whenever Vivian was present. The once regal hostess grew increasingly flustered, her carefully crafted mask beginning to crack. And when a well-respected philanthropist publicly questioned her about the persistent rumors of financial misdeeds, I knew the final phase of my plan was complete. The look of sheer panic on Vivian's face as she desperately attempted to maintain her rapidly crumbling facade was a sight more satisfying than I could have ever imagined. As the evening drew to a close and the other guests departed, I caught her eye from across the room. A silent message passed between us, a promise that this was merely the beginning of her reckoning. Vivian might have started this war, but I would be the one to finish it, no matter what it took to protect my family from her toxic world. The dinner party was a masterclass in restrained tension. As the guests arrived, I could practically taste the undercurrent of suspicion that permeated the air. Vivian, ever the consummate hostess, greeted each person with a brittle smile that barely concealed her simmering anxiety. Jonas caught my eye from across the room, his expression a mixture of confusion and concern. I offered him a reassuring nod, silently vowing that tonight would be the turning point, the moment when the scales finally tipped in our favor. As the evening progressed, the subtle jabs and thinly veiled insinuations began to take their toll on Vivian. With each probing question or pointed remark about the alleged charity scandal, her composure frayed a little more. "Surely there's been some misunderstanding," she simpered, dabbing at her perspiring brow with a lace-trimmed handkerchief. "My philanthropic endeavors have always been above reproach." But the guests didn't seem convinced. I watched with perverse satisfaction as even her most ardent supporters began to distance themselves, their faces etched with doubt. Theodore, Vivian's husband, appeared increasingly bewildered by the unfolding events. As the primary breadwinner, he had long been content to let his wife handle the social intricacies of their world. But now, as the whispers grew louder and the accusations more pointed, his brow furrowed with nascent suspicion. Finally, the moment I had been anticipating arrived. A well-respected socialite, one whose influence extended far beyond the city's elite circles, fixed Vivian with a steely gaze. "Vivian, darling, these rumors about your charitable affairs are becoming quite troubling," she declared, her voice carrying across the hushed room. "Perhaps it's time you addressed them openly, A hush fell over the assembled guests as all eyes turned towards the increasingly flustered hostess. For a brief moment, I thought Vivian might actually crumble under the weight of the scrutiny. Then something shifted in her expression. A flicker of defiance, a desperate attempt to cling to the tattered remnants of her once formidable reputation. "I have nothing to address," she snapped, her voice trembling with barely concealed rage. "These allegations are baseless slander propagated by those threatened by my success." A collective murmur rippled through the room, and I couldn't help but savor the delicious irony of her words. Threatened by her success, indeed, when the truth was, we had simply grown weary of her toxic elitism. As the evening drew to a close and the guests began to disperse, I caught Theodore's eye. The confusion and hurt etched across his features spoke volumes. This was a man finally glimpsing the true nature of the woman he had pledged his life to. And in that moment, I knew the tide had irrevocably turned. Vivian's meticulously constructed facade was crumbling, her blind arrogance rendering her oblivious to the cracks rapidly spreading through the foundation of her charmed life. As Alara and I departed, I couldn't resist one final parting shot. "Give my regards to Vivian," I murmured, allowing a hint of satisfaction to creep into my voice. Her world is about to come crashing down around her. With those words lingering in the air, I steered my daughter towards the waiting car, secure in the knowledge that justice, though long overdue, was finally being served. In the aftermath of the disastrous dinner party, a palpable shift hung in the air. Vivian, once the unquestioned queen of her social circle, found herself increasingly isolated, her former allies regarding her with thinly veiled disdain. Jonas, bless his heart, remained steadfastly by Alara's side, even as the foundations of his world crumbled around him. But I could see the strain etched across his features, the weight of his family's dysfunction bearing down upon his shoulders. It all came to a head one evening when Theodore summoned us to their estate, his voice grave over the phone. "There are matters we must discuss as a family," he intoned, and I couldn't help but detect an undercurrent of barely restrained fury. When we arrived, the tension was palpable. Vivian sat rigidly in the parlor, her once immaculate appearance slightly disheveled, a crack in the meticulously cultivated mask she had worn for so long. "Thank you for joining us," Theodore began, his expression somber. "I'm afraid I have some troubling news to share." He turned to his wife, and the look that passed between them spoke volumes, a lifetime of secrets and deceptions laid bare. "Vivian," he said, his voice trembling with barely contained emotion, "I know about the offshore accounts, the misappropriated funds, all of it." A collective gasp rippled through the room as Vivian's eyes widened in shock, her carefully constructed facade finally shattering. For a moment she seemed poised to offer one of her trademark denials, to attempt to spin yet another web of lies. But then, something in her deflated, and she simply slumped back in her chair, defeat etched across her features. "How?" she began, but the words seemed to catch in her throat. "That's not all," Theodore continued, his voice growing stronger with each syllable. "I've also learned about your indiscretions, the affairs, the secrets you've kept from me, from our family." Jonas recoiled as if struck, his face contorting in anguish. Alara instinctively reached for his hand, offering silent support in the face of this devastating revelation. As for Vivian, she seemed almost relieved, as if a great weight had finally been lifted from her shoulders. She turned to her son, her expression a twisted blend of remorse and defiance. "Jonas, my son, I did what I had to do to secure our family's legacy," she said, her voice unnaturally calm. "To maintain our standing in this unforgiving world. Can you not see that?" But Jonas simply shook his head, his jaw clenched with barely restrained fury. "No, Mother. What I see is a woman so consumed by her own greed and vanity that she lost sight of what truly matters." His words seemed to hang in the air, a damning indictment of the toxic foundations upon which Vivian had built her twisted empire. In that moment I felt an unexpected pang of pity for this broken woman, so desperate to cling to the tattered remnants of her significance that she had sacrificed everything: her integrity, her family, her very soul. As Theodore announced his intention to pursue divorce proceedings, I caught Alara's eye. A silent understanding passed between us, a solemn vow that we would never allow such poisonous influence to taint the love and trust that bound our own family together. And when Jonas pulled Alara close, whispering his intentions to break free from the suffocating confines of his parents' world, I knew that a new chapter was beginning. One defined not by wealth or status, but by the simple courage to chart one's own destiny. As we departed, leaving the wreckage of Vivian's shattered life behind, I couldn't help but feel a sense of vindication. The battle had been hard fought, but in the end, love and resilience had triumphed over a toxic world built on lies and false pretenses. It was a harsh lesson, to be sure, but one that would ensure my daughter's light never dimmed in the face of those too jaded to recognize her true worth. The weeks following Vivian's downfall were a whirlwind of change and upheaval. News of her misdeeds spread like wildfire, tainting the once impeccable reputation she had so desperately clung to. Society pages that had once fawned over her charitable endeavors now ran scathing exposés detailing the sordid details of her financial manipulations and illicit affairs. Overnight, she became a pariah, a cautionary tale of wealth and privilege gone horribly awry. Through it all, Alara remained stoically by Jonas's side, offering him a sense of steadfast support as he grappled with the destruction of everything he had once held dear. I couldn't help but admire her unwavering strength, her capacity for empathy even in the face of such personal betrayal. As for Theodore, he wasted no time in severing ties with his disgraced wife. Divorce proceedings were swiftly initiated, and the once formidable power couple found themselves facing a bitter public separation of their vast assets. In the midst of this turmoil, Jonas and Alara made a decision that simultaneously broke and lifted my heart. They would be leaving, embarking on a new chapter far away from the toxic influences that had nearly torn them apart. "We need to find our own way, free from the weight of others' expectations," Jonas explained one evening as we shared a simple dinner at my modest bookshop. His eyes shone with a newfound clarity, a resolve I had never witnessed before. Alara squeezed his hand, a radiant smile lighting up her face. "Mom, we've decided to elope. Just a small ceremony, with only those who truly matter." Though part of me ached at the thought of her leaving, I recognized the wisdom in their decision. They had been through emotional battles no young couple should ever have to face. It was time for them to spread their wings and soar, unburdened by the baggage of their pasts. In the days that followed, I did what I could to facilitate their plans, helping them secure the necessary documents and making discreet arrangements. And when the morning of their small, intimate ceremony arrived, I couldn't hold back the tears of pride and joy as I watched them exchange vows of everlasting love and fidelity. As they embarked on their new life together, I couldn't help but revel in the delicious irony of it all. Vivian had always viewed me as a contemptible commoner, unworthy of entering her rarefied world. Yet in the end, it was her own greed and moral bankruptcy that proved to be her undoing, leaving her wealthy beyond her wildest dreams, but bankrupt of the things that truly mattered. In the aftermath, my humble bookshop became an unlikely haven, a community hub where people from all walks of life gathered to celebrate the simple joys of literature and connection. Vivian's fall from grace served as a stark reminder that true wealth lies not in material possessions, but in the love and integrity we cultivate within our own families. And when a letter arrived from Alara and Jonas, detailing the profound contentment they had found in their new, unencumbered life, I couldn't help but feel an immense sense of peace and satisfaction. For in the end, I had succeeded in my most sacred mission, protecting the radiant light that was my daughter, ensuring it never dimmed in the face of those blinded by their own twisted notions of superiority. As I read their words, filled with gratitude and affirmation of the bonds that truly mattered, I knew that the battle had been worth fighting. Karma, it seemed, had delivered a final decisive blow, and love had emerged victorious over the shallow trappings of wealth and status. It was a triumph not just for my family, but for every person who had ever dared to stand tall in the face of those who sought to diminish their worth. And as I looked towards the future, I couldn't help but feel a sense of hope, a belief that no matter how dark the night, the indomitable human spirit would always find a way to reignite the flames of dignity and grace.